Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I am Marcus Engel. I am your hostess with the mostest, although I'm not a hostess, but this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. And today I am so excited to have the opportunity to interview Sven Gierlinger. And did I pronounce your last name right, Sven? I feel like a very bad German for not being able to pronounce that better.
It's Gierlinger, but Gierlinger is fine too. So I always say if it starts with a G and ends with an R, that's everything what happens in between is fine.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I always have to apologize because the way that my computer pronounces things is different than the actual pronunciation.
Understood.
And Sven, you're the head of patient experience for Northwell Health. Can you tell a little bit about Northwell and how you're using patient experience to better the lives of patients that come under that system?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really an honor for me to be with you here today. And so very excited about this conversation. Northwell is the largest healthcare provider in the state of New York, actually. So we have 21 hospitals and close to 800 physician practice locations. So we have a massive ambulatory network here as well. We have 81,000 employees delivering that care, which makes us also the largest private employer in the state of New York. So we are entrusted with delivering high quality care for millions of patients, and we are doing that in the most compassionate way we can. And as the Chief Experience Officer, I oversee all of the patient experience strategy and programming for our organization. And it's a wonderful organization, and New York is an incredible place, very diverse, as you know, and it's fun here.
I've had the opportunity to hear you share part of your story and how you ended up in this world of patient experience, kind of similar to myself, neither of us having clinical backgrounds. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the things that brought you to this work. I mean, you're at the largest private employer in the state of New York, so that's not only patient experience, that's not only hospitals. I mean, that is workforce on the most on the grandest scale. So that encompasses a wide variety of elements, I would assume.
Yes, of course it does. So about my background, I used to be in the hotel industry. I was a hotel executive for many years with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, and had no intention of leaving hotels. Hotels was my world. I loved it. I started in culinary, worked my way up, got into hotel management, originally in Germany, came to the U.S., got the opportunity with Ritz-Carlton, which was amazing, and especially when we talk about culture and the employee workforce. That's really where I learned a lot about driving a positive workforce culture, and that's what Ritz-Carlton was all about. No matter what market you were in across the globe, it was all about the employees, which then translated into a positive guest experience. Again, no intention of leaving, and it was my own patient experience that ultimately landed me in healthcare. So, making a long story short, I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a very debilitating neurological disease, where I found myself 3 months being hospitalized from head to toe, paralyzed, and it happened within a few days, actually. So from being perfectly normal to being not able to walk anymore in the hospital was about a week. I ended up in the ICU on a ventilator, intubated, had a feeding tube for many weeks because I couldn't eat. I was my whole body was paralyzed from my face to my arms to my legs, and it was a long process because after the 3 months of hospitalization, I came home and I was a home care patient basically. I had physical therapy at home. I had a nurse come to my house on a daily basis until I got better to go to physical therapy in an ambulatory facility for months, and then I was able to return to work after about a year. So I went through the entire continuum of care during that time. I didn't know at the time that term even existed, but I learned everything I needed to know about healthcare from the bedside and from the exam room. It really changed me. It changed my life as a result of that. It was painful, it was grueling at times, but what I learned the most was how incredible healthcare is and how amazing the people are that work in it. And I've learned firsthand what empathy and compassion means, and how important it is to have a connection with your care provider, this relationship with your care provider. And I mean that in the broadest sense, not just the physicians and the nurses, everybody really that comes in contact with you. And in my opinion, now that translates into trust. I've learned during that time that healthcare is a trust business. It's a relationship business, and it's a trust business. And I couldn't be more grateful to be where I am today, and how I ended up here, and where I'm able to use my hospitality experience coupled with my personal health journey, and to hopefully improve the lives of patients by leading patient experience for our organization.
When you're talking about the I guess the onset of the Guillain-Barré syndrome, what was your first symptom?
It was tingling and numbness in my hands and in my toes, and I suppressed the symptoms. I didn't act on them. I just was hoping that they would go away. Thought like I pinched a nerve or something like that, and then it moved, and that's what Guillain-Barré does. It moves from the outside in. So whatever the nerves that are furthest away from your central nervous system get affected first, and then the weakness set in, and I had 3 days later I had difficulty walking, and that's when I went to an urgent care center first. Next day primary care physician, next day neurologist, 3 days in a row, and then I was in the hospital. So everything went really, really fast.
Wow! And you say you were hospitalized for several months, and then a year of homebound recovery and rehab, right?
Yeah, until I was back to full strength, 100%, and I'm grateful that I did recover 100%. Not all Guillain-Barré patients do. Many of them have residual effects and residual paralysis, etc. So I'm very lucky that I recovered 100%. And now I run marathons.
And now you run marathons. That's a beautiful thing. I only have a very limited experience with Guillain-Barré, but one of my very close friends was in the hospital for a while with it, and he said whenever he could not swallow anymore was what sent him to the hospital. And I just have to think, that is so scary. That is so scary. And you received compassionate care. Was there any particular caregiver that did anything or said anything that really translated compassion and empathy and presence to you?
Here's the thing. It's that happened in the year 2000. It's in August of 2000, so that's over 22 years ago. I remember many of the people that cared for me during that time. And I talk about it every Monday. This morning I talked about it to all of our new employees, because I do new employee orientation after our CEO Michael Dowling speaks to our new employees in person. And I share my story, talk about how it relates to patient experience, and then I talk about how I remember the people. And so I obviously remember the physician that diagnosed me, Dr. Achetowska, and how caring she was and the time she took with me, sitting there with my wife, and we had two little children at home, a half-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. And the doctor says you have to go straight to the hospital and you're probably going to be in the ICU very shortly. Very scary. And then my wife drove me to the hospital, and the nurse, her name was Mary, I don't remember her last name, but I can still picture her today. And I would be able to pick her out of a crowd if I see her. My physical therapist, Kathy, she was unbelievable. She was so caring, but really knew how to connect with me through humor, and we had the same type of dry German humor, and that's what you need in those situations. And a patient care associate, his name was Stevie, so he was a nurse's aide, and I could go on, and it's so fascinating that. And that's why healthcare is so special. That's exactly my point that I make with the employees, that you are remembered for decades by the people. They don't even think about that, right? And everybody needs to be very mindful of that they're really changing people's lives, and that they're having an impact for the rest of their life, and the gratitude that comes with that from patients. It's just enormous.
I always say to nurses, it's like, really anybody who's at the bedside, it may be an average Tuesday for you, but it's quite possibly one of the most frightening and memorable days of that patient's life. And so what can we do in those moments to be sure that we are not treating it like it's just an average Tuesday, so that our patients really feel that we are present for them?
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I also love that you shared this story about, I believe, Kathy, your PT. Mm-hmm. I have to think that in some ways PTs they're part psychologist, right?
They are.
Because they have to understand who they're dealing with to know how to properly motivate them to keep moving the ways that they need to be moving. And I've thought that for a long time. It might be the first time I've ever said that out loud, but when you have to stop and evaluate to know how to work best with that patient, that's true presence again.
Exactly. And if you think about, especially in my situation, when you're paralyzed from head to toe and they start working with you, it's not, learning how to walk was already level 2 or 3 before you have to learn how to sit up, and to activate your trunk muscles again. And if all you can think about when they sit you up, that if they don't hold you, you're going to face plant forward and you have no way to catch yourself. And that was actually one of those things with Kathy. So, Kathy, you got me, right? So she said, yeah, I got you. And you're right. Physical therapists are, in my opinion, miracle workers. They are just incredible. It's an incredible profession that takes very special people that fulfill that role. And it's so motivating. I remember a time in the hospital when I made my first step, and the first step was more like a twitch. Like my leg twitched a little bit, but how they celebrated that was incredible. So by the time I was rolled back in the wheelchair, because you only in the gym for an hour, because then you only have so much stamina to deal with. And when they rolled me back to my room, for some reason, and I don't know how they did it, but the other physical therapists who were getting other patients to go to the gym, they were celebrating me and saying, "Hey, I heard you made your first step today," and that was just incredible. So it's and I remember today what a difference that made, and that cohesion of the team. So it's not just one physical therapist that you're working with; it was everybody. Like you felt they were in your corner and they were motivating you and cheering you on.
And so personalized too.
Yeah,
right. So
amazing.
personalized. Wow, that's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. How about now? You're a young father at this time. How's the care for your family?
Yeah, that's something that I thought about often. It's like my I was in the bed. I was taken care of by a team, and what I learned during that time is that the patient is really just the tip of the iceberg, and the person that you see in the bed. There's so many people that are affected by that, right? There's I'm from Germany, and my family from Germany was flying in. I've had friends from other parts of the country coming in. My wife was, managing 2 young children, and on top of that, we just 2 days before I had my first symptoms, we closed on a new house, but we didn't move in yet, and the old one was sold, and my wife had to deal with the move of our household while I was in the hospital. It was in Washington, D.C. She was trying to get to the hospital every day, but she didn't make it every day because she had to fight D.C. traffic to get there. It was about, without traffic, a 20-minute car ride, so that quickly could turn into 45 minutes to an hour in D.C. And so it's just traumatic for everybody involved. I was sometimes more worried about my family than I was about myself. And it, at that time, I think there was less focus on the caregiver, on the family caregiver. There were no caregiver centers like we have now in hospitals to really help with that. Or when I was discharged from the rehab hospital, going home in a wheelchair, there was a crash course basically for my wife 2 days before. The last 2 days were spent on teaching my wife how to transfer me from a wheelchair into a car, and how to deal with me in the home now, with what modifications we needed to make to take doors off and to make it ADA compliant, basically build a ramp to the back of the house so I can wheel up there, and and then you have little children that don't have their dad at home. I didn't see my baby for a long time because it was
it's ICU.
ICU. So and my wife was breastfeeding her, and she had to stop that because of her going into the ICU environment every day. But now the baby is a Northwell employee now. She started as a nurse 4 weeks ago.
Awesome! So, congratulations.
Yeah,
that's so great. That's
excited
so great.
about that.
That's so great. Wow, I just keep thinking, when it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
Right? You're laid up in ICU, you got kids to take care of, and you're moving. That's stress upon stress upon stress.
But that's another point I make in orientation, is always these things don't come scheduled, right? You don't plan them, and it always comes in the most inconvenient times of your life, and that's our role as healthcare providers, to treat our patients and their families holistically, and to take care of everybody's needs within that, and that makes it special, I think. When you do that.
And I wanted to ask you too, because you're a Barrel Patient Experience Institute board member, but I also saw that you're on. Is it the Institute for Innovation?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that. That was a new name to me.
So that is an institute that was founded by Prescani, actually, the survey vendor we use, and it is a lot of chief experience officers from across the country working on innovation in patient experience, but what's really helpful there is to see a lot of the data and the national data and the trends that come out of it, and then to react to that and have some really great thought exchange with some brilliant people. A lot of them are also part of the Barrel Institute.
Sure.
There's a lot of crossover. So the patient experience world is a small world, and it makes it fun.
What are some best practices that you're seeing these days in the I guess the whole ecosphere of patient experience?
So so much has been done in this work now over the years to the benefit of the patients that are really now, I think, robustly embedded into care that many organizations have adopted, from a focus on rounding to make sure that we communicate well with our patients. Some of the things that we've done, and something that I think on the provider side is really important, is the concept around transparency, to make your scores available for the public to see, and for the public to see the comments also about the physicians, which is changes, I think, the conversation in the exam room, right? That gives the patient a voice, that it's not just the patient and the provider, is that if they are exposed to things, if they are experiencing something that is not something that they would be, that they're happy with, and it impacts their experience and the healing, then they have a chance to voice that on their survey, and it changed, I think, the way physicians also look at that. And what's so interesting, though, is that if we look at the comments across our organization, it is the overwhelming majority is actually positive. And so it becomes something to celebrate. It's like, look how great our physicians are, and we have gotten to now almost the 90th percentile in provider communication, likelihood to recommend the provider on the national benchmark, which is tremendous.
And if that gets a little too far into the weeds for most listeners, let me just tell you, that's really, really impressive. That's really impressive. So congratulations on those gains, too.
Yeah, and that coupled with the communication training we're doing for physicians, which is we call it the Relationship Center Communication course for doctors, where they spend a whole day basically learning tools in terms of how to communicate with empathy with patients, and how to build that relationship, and then to partner with them in their care. And we've seen great results from that. We're close to 3,000 providers that have gone through that training in our organization over the last few years. And I think all those things in combination lead to those results.
That's fantastic. What do the providers say after going through the training? After
going through the training, it's really fascinating. So overwhelmingly, they say that it's a huge benefit to them. It's not something that they learned necessarily in medical school or in their residency. I had some providers come to me and say that very experienced providers and highly respected physicians say, I question now how I practice medicine for the last few decades, because of what they learned through that. But also the impact that it has on, not just on what we would call the patient satisfaction pieces of it, also in their opinion, on the quality of the care. And because they were able, through that communication, find out things that they would not have gotten in the past.
Yeah.
When they ask, tell me more about this, or ask open-ended questions, and letting the patient talk and not cut them off early on in the process. So all those principles help them be. That's the feedback we're getting from the doctors. Help them to be better doctors.
And whenever you can have an aha moment that makes you think, wow, what I've been doing for decades, I wish I'd been doing something different, and now I know. That's a pretty powerful moment.
It really is.
Wow.
And it's all physicians that are training, that are faculty to do the training. There's one non-physician, but it's a lot of physicians giving their time to teach others, and they're the master facilitators basically. And when doctors hear it from other doctors, then they listen.
Mm-hmm.
It lands.
I think but I've been teaching Notre Dame for the last 5 or 6 years now, and we're trying to give these pre-meds that same sort of vocabulary to be able to know how to ask open-ended questions, to provide that therapeutic presence. And we're trying to do it young, right? While they're still in undergrad, so you don't have 10 years of bad habits to get out of. And
correct.
I think really so often we just need exposure to another way. It's like once we see another way, we'll do it in another way, but often we just need that exposure. And so I'm so glad that your docs are finding such benefit in teaching that as well as receiving it.
And we're teaching it also in our medical school. So we have a medical school.
Excellent.
The Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell. And so I think, to your point, starting early and starting young is the way to do it. And we are, I think, as a result of that, creating better doctors of the future.
Yeah. That's so great. Well, Sven, in the time we have left, can I shoot a couple of random questions past you? All right, so let's go back to Sven being a teenager. You're 16, 17 years old. You're in high school.
Oh boy!
You're hanging out with your friends after school, and what's on the radio? What are you all listening to?
16 years old. Oh boy! I was listening to the 80s new wave music, Duran Duran. I did listen to Queen a lot. What else? So that's
I got the genre there.
That's
the time
music.
too,
Growing
right?
Up, yeah.
Time frame too. Excellent. So oftentimes,
Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, 80s. It's the MTV generation.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Whatever was on MTV is what we were listening to.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I often ask a question that ultimately I've stopped asking. I usually ask people, hey, if you opened up your wallet or your crypto account, maybe not anymore, but if you opened up your wallet or purse and found $100 bill, I always ask, well, what's the first thing you would spend that $100 on? And most everyone in healthcare says that they'd go buy something for someone else, because that's just the heart of healthcare professionals. So I wanted to ask you, though, a different question, and I'll ask you, what is the coolest thing in your home? What's something in your home that's a possession that's the coolest thing that you have?
The coolest thing.
Is it a piece of art? Is it a painting? Is it an heirloom? Is it an antique? Is it a piece of furniture?
Well, can I say what excites me most?
Sure, please.
In my home? It's my range. It's my stove. So that, because I love cooking and cooking for others, brings me back to my roots of having started out in culinary, and now I can use that to make other people happy. And we just renovated our kitchen not too long ago, and we bought a very nice range that makes me very happy to stand in
Nice,
front of,
nice. Is that
to put to work.
Thank you. Okay, and so for my last question then for you today, let's say that I love that answer too. Cooking is such a joy, and when you can find the exact right elements for your workspace, that's a game changer too. And so for my last question is let's say you were stranded on the proverbial desert island, but on this desert island you can keep one piece of art or some type of artistic expression with you, whether that is a film or a book or a Netflix series or a Broadway play. And another way to ask this question might be, what is a piece of art that really speaks to you?
Oh, oh boy. I mean, I love all kinds of art. I love visual arts, but music speaks to me probably the most. And on a desert island, I would say I have a son who is actually pursuing a music career, and he is in conservatory now to become a classical pianist, and it would be a recording of his music that I would put over everything, I would say.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, Sven, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, and thank you for sharing part of your story and the cool things that you guys are doing up at Northwell. I get to visit a lot of hospitals around the country, and I hope that listeners from those other hospitals can learn from your examples, and by instituting some of those best practices that we can continue to take better care of our patients, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Marcus. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. And congrats on the great work that you're doing and the great advocate you are for empathic care.
Thank you. And everyone, thank you for being with us on this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Thank you to everyone who continues to comment and share and subscribe and do all of those social media things. We are very, very appreciative, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the CNC podcast.